Okay. Thank you again, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us today and jumping on this call with us. Uh, Thanks for sharing where you're joining us from in the chat, those that did. And we're excited to present our presentation today on habitat management on the largest working cattle ranch in Harris County, the Warren Ranch. So I'm sure a few people, maybe more than a few that are on the call have visited or volunteered with us and been to the Warren Ranch. So Stephen Deiss is our new working lands director. He joined us in early 2025. So today we'll be discussing the history and management of the Warren Ranch, along with how productive ranching and land stewardship go hand in hand. At the end of this presentation, we're going to touch on how CPC and our regional partners are working to protect working ranches and also some funding sources that are available to landowners to help protect and manage their properties. So, brief introduction, my name is Lily Bowes and I'm the Regional Programs Manager with Coastal Prairie Conservancy. If you are not familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit land trust based in Houston, Texas, and we seek to sustain a resilient Texas by preserving coastal prairies, wetlands, farms, and ranches to benefit people and wildlife forever. So before I introduce Stephen, I want to make a disclaimer to the audience. This presentation is accredited by the Texas Department of Agriculture for one CEU, one continuing education unit for drift minimization. So if you're interested in claiming that certificate of completion, we will have a poll at the end. And we do need your email, your first and last name, your ID number, and county residence. So that's important so I can email your certificate of completion since we would like to give it to those who would like to receive it. And since this is online, it's a little difficult if you come and we don't have your email. So my email's up here. If you have any trouble with the poll at the end, just, email me, email anybody at CPC, and we'll help you get that certificate of completion. So I'm going to move on to introducing our wonderful presenter today, Stephen Deiss. As I mentioned, he's our working lands director, and Stephen has a degree in animal science and range science from Texas A&M University. He's where he worked at the Beef Cattle Center and assisted with rangeland research. These experiences deepen his knowledge of livestock management and hone his skills in teaching and scientific fieldwork. He later returned to A&M to earn his MBA, and his professional career has included roles such as regional manager, district conservationist, and rangeland management specialist with conservation agencies. He's also worked for a large ranch in the Coastal Bend developing livestock water infrastructure, along with his previous position at Wildlife Habitat Federation, where he created conservation plans and delivered presentations on topics like grazing management, prescribed fire, and brush control. So we're very excited to turn it over to Stephen. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll save some time at the end. But Stephen, I think this is your first webinar CEU that you've delivered, and you've delivered some in the past.
I've always done them live and in person, but I've helped people get quite a few hours for their pesticide license.
Yes, so Stephen's our experienced presenter. So thank you, Stephen. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, in a new format. All right. Well, first off, I'd like to offer thanks to Marianne Piacentini, our Coastal Prairie Conservancy president and CEO, for allowing me time to tell you our story. And I hope this is insightful, immaterial of the reason why you're tuning in today. I'd also like to profusely thank Lily Bowes for undertaking the Herculean task of building the framework for this presentation and trying to keep me on task. So the Warren Ranch, it's a unique place with an interesting history. We deal with problems common to any ranch in the Texas coastal region, and any time I visit with a rancher or landowner, it isn't very long until we get around to the topic of brush and brush management. Along with grazing management, Brush and brush management is a huge part of building and keeping habitat in this part of the world. And that's a big focus of this webinar as well. Just to let you know, the property is leased for hunting with a few key areas across the ranch that are excluded. So, the Coastal Prairie Conservancy, the mission is sustaining a resilient Texas by preserving coastal prairies, wetlands, farms, and ranches to benefit people and wildlife forever. It's very important to the Conservancy to keep these properties in working order and producing agricultural goods. My role is Working Lands Director, but I certainly don't do this by myself. The whole staff at CPC is most helpful, along with folks from a variety of organizations and agencies. Uh, Next slide, Lily. So this is the purview of the Katy Prairie Preserve. The properties on the map that appear in green are owned by the Conservancy, and the ones in brown have a conservation easement on them. So you can see that this is a pretty vast area in a very rapidly developing part of the world. We're just northwest of Houston, southwest of Cypress, and we have quite uh, an an issue with we don't have an issue with development per se. We understand that people need their housing, but it does create some unique problems across the Conservancy. Next slide, Lily. So the bulk of my work is with, of course, the Warren Ranch. And on this ranch, there are grazing lands, hay lands, and croplands. And for the grazing lands, we have four basic herds in rotation groups across the ranch. And west, there's two sides. The line that you see that splits the two parts of the ranch, that is a combination of Warren Ranch Road, the north-south part of that. The east-west part is Jack Road. Um, there are four basic herds, as I mentioned, and the grazing on in all that is on the west side to the west and south, and grazing is least east of the Warren Ranch Road. You can see a prominent feature on the map, Warren Lake, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. So, history of Warren Ranch. Well, the ranch has been in operation since the 1870s. There's some key dates. In 1852, John Warren arrived in Hockley from England. In 1870, John Warren appears in the census as an ag operator. Many of the acres of the ranch were purchased through certificates that were issued to the railroad. And before the land was purchased, John Warren had his cattle operation on it already, operating under the auspices of open range. The ranch is about 6,000 acres on the Katy Prairie. It's the largest remaining and longest operating ranch in Harris County. In 2003, the then Katy Prairie Conservancy purchased an undivided interest in the Warren Ranch from a family member. There were rice farms that were developed across the ranch, or rice fields developed across the ranch after World War II. Of course, we mentioned again that it was leased for outdoor recreation. And it's a large property that's surrounded by rapidly expanding urban infrastructure. Next slide, please. Okay, the photo that you see is of John Warren III, also known as Jack, and he's aboard a horse called Hellzapoppin, who sired a lot of good horses for the Warren Ranch. The early Warren Ranch horses were influenced by Spanish Mustangs, and these were crossed with horses brought by U.S. immigrants to the area to serve purposes like saddle horses and plowing fields. Warren Ranch horses were horses basically that could work cattle. The Warren Ranch, of course, is known for their breeding and raising of quarter horses. The ranch was also instrumental in the development and growth of the American Quarter Horse Association. There were thoroughbred and bulldog type horses that were mentioned as part of the horses that were raised on the ranch. The thoroughbred horses are registered with a C at the end of the registration number, and the bulldog type horses are registered with an A at the end of their registration number with AQHA. The bulldog horses were kind of those short, very thick across the back um, horses that were really good and strong for working cattle. They had a very quick, short burst of speed, um, but they didn't run a very long way. The thoroughbred types, of course, were long and lean and had long stride and could run for a long, long while. So it was somewhere in between these two that they found a sweet spot in developing the kind of horses that they needed on the ranch. Next slide, please. Warren Lake. It's a very prominent structure. It appears very visually on the map. This lake was built in the 1950s, and it's about 160 acres. It's at a higher elevation than most of the rice fields at the south end. Um, and also, this is the area where we have a Shrike Prairie, which is a public access area. Um, that's where the Matt Cook Memorial Viewing Platform was built in 2010. The lake has a lot of wildlife um, coming through and using the area of the lake and the area surrounding the lake. So that's a very unique habitat across the prairie. Next slide, please. So this is a visual of urban expansion over time. There was a lot of foresight that went in protecting lands by the Coastal Prairie Conservancy, and the importance of such can be visualized by this time-lapse map. You can see, Lily, would you mind running that again? You know, it kind of really explodes probably in the 2000s, but just look at it creeping across. So this encroachment, it plays a role in how we need to be careful about how we conduct our business on the ranch. We're so visible now, and it's important that we do things just absolutely correct. Next slide, Lily. So the ranch today is a working cattle ranch. There's crossbred Brahma type cattle. The Brahma influence in the cattle is so they can withstand the environment that they're subjected to on the ranch. I had a instructor in beef cattle science that taught sort of the capstone course in beef cattle management at A&M, and he once made the remark during one of the lectures that the Gulf Coast of Texas is probably about the hardest place on the whole planet to raise cattle because there's so much going against them. You have parasites, disease, you have disease bearing insects, parasites, and the heat, humidity. The grasses are washy. They don't have the nutrient content that grasses, say, further west and north would have. Um, so it's, you just about have to have cattle that have a little bit of Brahman in them in this part of the world. Um, the pasture lands, they're primarily a mix of Bahia and Bermuda, although there are a lot of places that have native vegetation growing in them. Um, but the rice farming and the management kind of caused a little bit of a shift towards a non-native grass mix, and it possibly comes from also just the relative productivity of those grasses in the post-rice farming time frame. And so if you wouldn't mind moving that one click, okay. So the weather and ecology of the Warren Ranch. Well, it's hot and humid, and it certainly has been this year. But however, that hot and humid in terms of drift and keeping herbicides on your side of the fence, I guess, so to speak, that hot and humid helps to break down herbicides. We have a high precipitation, which grows a lot of grass, but again, it's kind of a little bit lower in nutrients because it does have that high content of water. We have a relatively long growing season. We don't have a lot of early or late frost. It's mostly confined to that center of the winter when we have cold weather of any sort, and cold weather just doesn't really last a long time around here. We have the coastal prairie habitat, which is an imperiled ecosystem. I think there's less than 3% or so of the coastal prairie remaining. So it's a very, very honorable that we're protecting this ecosystem. And of course, the ranch is a part of the Katy Prairie Preserve System. We have upland and wetland habitats. We have a diverse wildlife. We have quail, quite a few quail here, and I was kind of surprised when I first started working here that we did have so many quail. We have deer, waterfowl, and a host of shorebirds. The habitat, though, requires maintenance and disturbance. And we do have a salt dome, which has impacted some areas across the ranch that have some saline soils and have saline type plant species. Next slide, please. So one of the species that seems to prefer some of the hard pan and maybe a little bit saltier areas is Texas prairie dawn, Hymenopsis texana. And that is an endangered species at the federal and state levels. It influences our management considerations. For instance, we're not going to go plowing through a bunch of prairie dawn to uh, build a build a fire guard or something like that. We're going to avoid those areas of prairie dawn when we conduct spraying. Um, and that's also, you know, it's something worth keeping. It's something that's rare, and we have quite a bit of it at the Warren Ranch. There's an annual prairie dawn count that's conducted each year at Warren Ranch, and so we can kind of keep track of where these plants exist. There's the Hockley Salt Dome is within the ranch. The salt mine, they have a salt mine at the corner of, basically the corner of Warren Ranch Road and Jack Road. And that salt mine lease that's on the property was signed in 1927. So the mining started shortly thereafter. And if you've ever driven by and noticed the big barn, it says Warren Ranch 1927 on it. That's not when the ranch started. The ranch started substantially earlier than that, but the 27 on the barn is symbolic of when that particular barn was built. Okay. So we want to maintain good habitat and provide high quality grazing for cattle. Well, how do we do this? Well, a good bit of it is we're always scheming about how to reduce the effects of invasive non-native species. You know, in the picture on the left, you see some rose hedge. There's probably some sedge in there somewhere. And in the background and some of the foreground, you can see some Chinese tallow coming on. We want it to look more like the right side where we do have the woody vegetation along riparian corridors, which we have quite a bit of on the ranch, but we would like to have it a little bit more grass dominated as per the ecological sites as they originally were. So there are many things that grow on the Warren Ranch, but not all of them are good. And our three main enemies include Chinese tallow, Triadica sebifera, which was actually introduced in the 1700s as an ornamental and spread to Texas in the early 1900s. USDA promoted the establishment to benefit the soap and seed oil industry, and it produces tremendous numbers of seeds, and they seem to be spread by wildlife, um, and probably a lot by birds. In that, you know, going across the ranch, there always seems to be Chinese tallow on the fences. And the reason for that is the birds land on the fence after having eaten Chinese tallow berries, I guess, and then they plant a lot of these for us. Okay. Another one that we have that we're constantly dealing with is McCartney rose, Rosa bracteata, which was introduced to Texas from Asia in the late 1800s. The idea was to use in Texas for fence material and to prevent erosion, although I kind of question the erosion prevention angle because it seems to me like overland flow, it might do all right with the rain directly on it because it has a very high leaf area index. In other words, it has a dense, quite a bit of dense leaf before a raindrop could get to the ground that hits it near the top. Um, but below it, there's hardly anything ever growing underneath it. And this plant was probably taken from an area that was a little more temperate weather and brought to a subtropical and just expanded from there. Another problem that we have is deep-rooted sedge. This is a more grass-like problem than it is brush, but it has the same effect as brush does in that it takes away from the vegetation that's supposed to be there. It's Cyperus intrarianus. The sedge uh, reportedly arrived with imported rice seed around the 1940s from South America. It colonized predominantly in wet areas and managed to escape to the more upland areas. Okay. So some of the things that we work on, we have a process that we've kind of developed, and Alex got this started when she was here, um, a process of integrating several different types of treatment in order to take care of the problems, or at least alleviate them somewhat. So one of the first steps is mechanical control. And a lot of that is just reducing the top, or either to make it regrow or get it to a treatable state. This mechanical treatment, as far as drift control and what all, doesn't cause a lot of alarm, and it's oftentimes all the way out of view. So spraying alone, when you have those tall uh, rose hedge clumps in a field, going across them with a aircraft and spraying kind of creates a little bit of a shadowing effect where you don't get herbicide across the entire plant or don't get the greatest of coverage. And that's because of that leaf area index I was referring to, where it has a tremendous number of leaves that droplet would have to overcome to get to the other side of the plant as you're spraying across one side. So taking the mechanical methodology and going across those clumps, knocking them down, and then spraying, now you have sort of a little bit of a compressed area that you can spray across. And this is a key method for reducing drift, as well as because you're able to apply herbicide as close to the plant as possible. Next, we have a little film showing the roller chopping taking place.
I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties that the video is not playing.
Oh, well, I'll just talk about this then. So this roller chopper is a gang of three separate choppers, three rollers. They're pulled by a large tractor. Um, the gangs are each 12 foot in width, and they go across and knock down the, you can see in the foreground some prior treated rose hedge. And when using a tractor, you just can't attack it from the middle, especially when there's a clump of rose hedge ahead of you that's as tall as the one that's just to the left of the tractor in that picture. You take it a little bit at a time, and oftentimes when the operator is using that roller chopper, they can only get about 12 foot at a time. So it's a little bit costly to do that, but I think it'll prove out to be a very valuable way of attacking this brush, mainly just like we mentioned, or like I mentioned, that it allows for greater surface exposure, and that way herbicide can get on a higher proportion of the leaves upon regrowth. Um, okay, chemical control. So that's the next step after the mechanical. The chemical application can cause some alarm, especially in our area where we have more and more people and we're visible from the road as well. That can cause some alarm as aircraft spraying can often be seen from a road or neighborhood. Um, so this is one of the things that we will deal with, and we're just going to have to make sure that we do things exactly right and are not called to task on any of these applications. This is an extremely valuable tool, and it can't be done with just a small implement. It's going to have to be done by aircraft with the bulk of the acreage that we have to do. Next slide, please. So hopefully one day we can get to the point where we can use a rig very similar to this, just for cleanup of edges, cleanup of fence rows, uh, just individual plant treatment. But for right now, this is kind of our herbicides that we use for treating the brush. Is a combination, a blend of picloram and 2,4-D. Recently, there's been a 2,4-D choline formulation that has come out that has a whole lot less drift potential than the amine that was commonly used before. The picloram is a little more persistent in the environment than the 2,4-D. The 2,4-D has a half-life of about 7 days, so it kind of comes and goes pretty quick. The picloram sticks around a little bit more. The McCartney rose is a little bit more difficult to manage, primarily because it can sprout from root crowns, creeping roots, or from stems, in addition to whatever seed it produces. The Chinese tallow, they're marginally easier to manage, but it produces so many seed, and once you treat the parent plant, then you have all the children that suddenly get sunlight and moisture, and here they come. Next slide, please. Sedge. Wow, sedge is really the king of seed production. It can produce up to 1 million seed per plant per year. So you don't need to have a whole lot of survival on a production like that to keep it from having a big problem. So our recipe on that is a combination of dicamba and 2,4-D. Now, dicamba and 2,4-D are both regulated herbicides by the Texas Department of Agriculture. Um, so they have a special, you have to have a license to utilize them. And here in Harris County, specifically, Harris County is a regulated county. The use of high volatile herbicides is prohibited, and they also list the regulation of in no case shall 2,4-D be used to treat any area that it's nearer than 2 miles to any susceptible crop. So what do they mean by susceptible crops? So that's anything like cotton is one of them. Tomatoes, gardens, valuable garden plants, nurseries, um, grapes, those kind of things are susceptible crops. So how we attack this is by mowing or burning prior to treatment and you allow for regrowth and you treat the regrowth. So that's what we have in the works to deal with our sedge that we have across the ranch. So Herb, here we go into a little bit more of the drift control, a little bit greater focus on it. Basic physics, a larger nozzle opening will allow you to have large droplets. Large droplets are less prone to drift. Higher pressure yields a smaller droplet. So what you're trying to achieve is as large a droplet that gets good coverage at the operating pressure that you're looking for. So here you see a chart. One of the boomless nozzles that I use is that top one in green. I operate at 40 psi. So if I target 6 gallons per acre, because I have a 60-gallon tank and that just computes a little easier, I can see that I can run 40 psi and run that at 7 miles an hour and achieve that 6 gallons per acre. And that's putting that out at a 12-foot swath at that 40 psi on the far right. So they have these charts to get started. It's always good if you have your own machine to calibrate it. There's many ways of calibrating. There's tons of apps and websites that'll help you do this. The next part of this slide, uh, Lily. So looking at these nozzles, I had purchased a boom sprayer at one time, and the nozzles that came with it were the ones that were on the top right, the yellow nozzle, uh, and I noticed that to achieve the right miles an hour to get across the field, plus the pressure, that it was creating too much of a mist, and that those are prone to drifting pretty bad, even with the ground rig. Um, Once I changed to the blue nozzle, then everything had a little bit larger droplet, and I wasn't getting quite as much mist on delivery. So that's the kind of things to be aware of and check if you do outfit a sprayer. Next, please. Wind and drift considerations. Well, generally speaking, don't apply when the wind is over 10 miles an hour. But how do you know? Well, you can measure with an anemometer like the Crestal unit that you see on the right there, but it's a little deceptive. We've grown up watching the news and reading weather forecasts, and when they say a 10-mile-an-hour wind, that doesn't sound like a whole lot because it's not. When your weatherman, he's he's getting the weather or the wind speed at 33 feet up in the air. On the ground, it's going to be quite a bit less, usually around 50 to 60% of that. So, if you're on the ground and you're reading 10 miles an hour at eye level with your Kestrel, that wind is going pretty swiftly. So you can get current weather on your phone app as well. There's lots of Weather Channel has apps, Weather Underground, um, AccuWeather. They all have apps and they all say relatively the same thing. WeatherBug is one that I use as well. I usually check more than one just to make sure. And like I mentioned before, the roller chopper assists in lowering the vegetation to a level where the wind is less. So there's another benefit of the roller chopper. Sensitive receptors are a little bit different than susceptible crops, although there might be some overlap with vegetable gardens, trees, and flowers and cotton, but also schools. If we have continue to have neighborhoods develop around us, we certainly don't want to get into a position where they notice the effects of pesticide application on some plants around them. Then they're going to suspect that, well, one, just the plants themselves have been damaged, but also what is in the air that we're breathing. So we certainly want to make sure to take every precaution and use the right equipment to be able to avoid um, such a situation. Next, please. Prescribed burning. Ooh. Well, this is a fantastic way to invigorate a plant community in a favorable manner, but the smoke on the horizon often causes panic. And I'm sure that when prescribed burns are conducted on the Warren Ranch, that the TCEQ, the commissioners, the sheriff's office, everything like that receives plenty of phone calls about fire. And in my experience, smoke on the horizon is always much further away than what you think at first. Um, but it's the most visible sign that something is going on. More often than not, it's the smoke that causes the problems rather than the fire itself. Considerations. Well, here's a case that's just right next to Warren Ranch on another property that's owned by the Coastal Prairie Conservancy called Jack Road South. This is an actual real life thing that we dealt with a little bit yesterday and talked about. So in the on the map, the area outlined in red was originally planned to be prescribed burn, to have a prescribed burn run across it. However, those homes that you see to the east or to the right, you'd have to get written permission to burn when those homes exist within 300 foot of where you intend to burn. Um, the area in yellow is what we pretty much settled on yesterday, noting that the using the road there as a fire guard, that puts us about 465 feet away from those homes. So that alleviates the need to get written permission to burn, which would be probably just about impossible. In burning in general, you can use roads as fire guards. There's uh, when I have planned burns in the past, I generally plan on a southeast wind, which is the prevalent wind on the Gulf Coast. And you can use predictive models to determine where the smoke will go. The one I mostly use is called V Smoke, and it's on the web. Uh, you can't hide your fires anymore because there's plenty of services and that can track smoke back to the source. And other considerations on burning is being aware of impacting schools or roadways and etc. For instance, on the place that we just looked at on Jack Road South, this would be the smoke plume. Now, of course, that smoke plume is a lot wider than that. That's only given for that particular point in that field. But I set up a scenario that would probably work for that field during a burn. And those rings are areas the closer to the center that you get, the more intense the smoke is and the more hazardous it is. So if smoke did not rise well enough during the day, if you picked a poor day for smoke dissipation, then odds of running smoke across Jack Road are really good. They're really good anyway, just because it's right on the road. But maybe that's a case where another wind direction might be more preferable, maybe a northeast wind, perhaps. So that's the kind of things that need to be considered when conducting prescribed burning. Okay, Lily. So we're using an integrated approach where our management philosophy is that we're going to combine the prescribed grazing with prescribed burning, and where needed, we're going to conduct mechanical and chemical brush management. I think the key probably is the prescribed grazing. Here on Warren Ranch, there are just under 400 cows, and it's it's probably on the margin of being understocked, but that's preferable. We're kind of using the cattle as not only an economic factor, but it also as a tool to manage habitat. You know, we can grow a lot of things. Grassland birds kind of need a little bit of open space, particularly quail, to navigate through. It would be very difficult for them to manage their way through a real thick um, growth of grass and forbs. So that disturbance is needed and desired. Okay, let's talk about habitat management funding opportunities. Well, one of the things we use here on Warren Ranch is the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. And I think over time that really made the ranch be conscious of the grazing period and the incorporation of rest. Um, I'm pretty sure that Alex started that, and that is very much appreciated, and we're continuing with that. The Coastal Grassland Restoration Incentive Program has helped us with conducting some of the roller chopping. Um, you know, there've been a great benefit to us from that standpoint. I guess I'd say, you got to do your own financial analysis as in participating in these programs. It's very important to understand all the rules and regulations of the management contracts. What are you going to be required to do? You want to make it where there's no surprises uh, once you've conducted your practice and spent a bunch of money on it. Just to let you know, the Coastal Prairie Conservancy is the lead partner in 2 regional conservation partnership programs. One of them is the Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative, and the other is the Texas Grasslands and Savannas Initiative. Both of these programs are overseen by USDA, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and working with many regional partners, as you see in the list off to the right. There's a lot of overlap in that, but there are a little bit of differences as well. The map on the left depicts the area where Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative is offered, and the map on the right is where the Texas Grasslands and Savannas Initiative is offered. There's a little bit of difference in that. Washington, Grimes, Montgomery, Gonzales, and Fayette, as well as DeWitt County, are added to TCPI for TGSI, and Victoria drops out. And Victoria and Calhoun and Chambers drop out. So some of the similarities and differences, well, Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative was started a little earlier by 3 years. It's the grant there was $7 million. Texas Grasslands and Savannas Initiative was established in 2024, and it was $25 million. The number of counties eligible, we talked about that a little bit. For the TCPI, the focus is on the coastal prairie ecosystems and focus species like prairie chicken, monarch butterfly, and bobwhite quail. The focus for TGSI is on grasslands and savannas ecosystems. And their focus is also on grazing and ranch lands, grassland conservation and grazing management. Whereas TCPI, the focus is on wetlands, grasslands, and woodlands. Next slide, please. So the funding overview. NRCS funds may pay landowners 50% of the value of a conservation easements, and habitat management are two sources of with each of the programs there can be easements or habitat management. There's no AGI requirements. They're not income restricted. Habitat management, under that, free technical assistance is available to prepare conservation plans. And NRCS has set up RCPP payment rates for eligible practices. And the eligible practices appear on the right in that list. So it's very similar to the EQIP process, but no AGI requirement. There's an upcoming deadline for submitting a application, which is October 17th. The pre-screening worksheets are due to the Coastal Prairie Conservancy at that time, and there's certainly plenty of help to help you fill out your worksheet. Okay, so in summary, the Warren Ranch is a working ranch in Harris County in the suburban rural interface. The Warren Ranch is part of the Katy Prairie Preserve System and is managed by the Coastal Prairie Conservancy and the Warren Ranch. And there's opportunities to fund conservation easements and habitat management practices through TCPI and TGSI. Free technical assistance is available. I want to remind you that the deadline to submit pre-screening worksheets is October 17th, 2025. And for those of you that are interested in history, Jim Warren has written a book called The History of the Warren Ranch. It's extremely well written. It's a very easy read. And that book has been, and I hope they still are, available through the Waller Area Chamber of Commerce. Okay, Lily.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I hope everybody, learned some new information about the Warren Ranch today and some opportunities to get involved with us, maybe prairie dog monitoring, visiting the Mac Cook platform, maybe reading Jim Warren's book, like Stephen just mentioned. I am going to run a poll, like I mentioned at the beginning, to collect information for folks who are wanting to claim that CEU. So it's going to pop up on your Zoom screen in just 1 second. So you should be seeing the poll open right now. Again, if you're having difficulty filling this out, please, send me an email. I'm going to send an email post this presentation with all the links, recordings, and details. So you could, as long as you've registered and can share your email with me and, we can connect with each other, I can get you that certification. So while people are filling out that poll, I just wanted to highlight a comment someone asked in the chat. They asked, where could I find info on programs for ranches in Jefferson County? And Elisa Donovan, she left a message where we can connect you with Wildlife Habitat Federation, who's our partner. They're our partner that does the free technical assistance, which was mentioned earlier. So we'll connect you with them and they can talk about, potential other funding sources since our programs don't cover the TCPI and TGCI don't cover Jefferson County, but there are other programs available throughout the state and they'll set up a site visit with you and talk about your habitat restoration and management goals. So if that's of interest, we hope you'll reach out to us. But while this is going through, just again, another thank you to Stephen Deiss. And while people are filling out that poll still, I wanted to share an upcoming event that we have just released the flyer for. This is our 2025 Restoration Roundup Workshop in partnership with Wildlife Habitat Federation. This is taking place at Sandhill Farm, which some of you may be familiar with. It's our neighbor at the Katy Prairie Preserve out in Waller, Texas. We're going to be having an in-classroom portion discussing the management of Sandhill Farm, talking about land trust and landowner partnerships, and also some discussions on grassland and wetland restoration. We'll serve lunch, and in the afternoon, there'll be a field tour portion where the property manager, Mark Ely, and Gary Stevens of WHF, they'll be guiding us through some restoration sites. So it should be a very interesting and fun day. We're capping registration at 40 people, so we have the QR code on the screen here and the bit.ly link, and I'll also share that at the end of this presentation. But, that's another learning opportunity. We'd be happy for you to come join us. So does anybody have any questions that they've put in the chat or would like to unmute and ask Stephen? Thank you, Marianne. Marianne, would you like to talk more about some other NRCS programs?
Yeah, I just wanted everybody to know that in addition to our regional conservation partnership programs, excuse me, that Stephen mentioned, you can actually go directly to Natural Resources Conservation Service. They have an EQIP program, which is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and they also have agricultural land easements. Now, again, there is an adjusted gross income requirement for most of those, but a lot of people can actually also fit into that as well. And then Stephen had on his slide, I think the pastures for upland birds that Texas Parks and Wildlife have. They also have a, I think it's a landowners incentive program. And then Fish and Wildlife Service has Partners for Wildlife. So I know Wildlife Habitat Federation can help you with a lot of those. But you can also, even just a Google search will get you those, but we're happy to help as well. So Stephen knows a lot of them, and you can just get in touch with us or get in touch with Wildlife Habitat Federation because they know everything.
Marianne, thank you for that plug. Hi, this is Ann Vance with Wildlife Habitat Federation. I dropped our email into the chat, or you can find us online, Wildlife Habitat Federation. Just give us a Google and we'd be happy to help you out. Thank you so much.
And the other thing I was going to mention when Stephen talked about the conservation plan for our program, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen and Elisa, but you have to have a conservation plan, and Wildlife Habitat Federation is our partner in that and can help you do that free so that you will have a good plan for your ranch or your farm. You probably already know a lot of those things that need to be done, but this puts it in, sort of codifies it and makes sure that it fits the NRCS guidelines.
You are exactly right.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marianne. Yes, there's lots of different programs. Our role is to help you and other landowners and other partners too, is just helping each other learn all that's out there and navigating this space, since we do know that it can be, a lot of acronyms, a lot of different organizations. But, if this is something you're interested, we just love to discuss what your goals are for your property and hear about it. But I
Lily,
just want
there's another question in the chat.
thank you. Yes, the video will be available online. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel, and all the registrants will be receiving an email with the recording, and along with some of the other resources we've talked about today. So, yes, thank you, Lisa, for plugging our website. prairiepartner.org is a great resource to, explore both TCPI and TGSI and learn more about the programs. And we've also taken the time to kind of accumulate other federal and state funding resources. So we'll include that in the email as well.
Yeah, and Ann, do you want to tell who does the plans for Wildlife Habitat Federation?
I sure can. So right now we are continuing an agreement with NRCS that we're able to produce these conservation plans at no charge to the landowner, which is a huge benefit. A Wildlife Habitat Federation conservationist comes out, meets you at your property, and works with you as you the landowner, determine what your conservation priorities are for your land, what you want to accomplish, and we help you plan the roadmap to get there. In a
Right.
nutshell, that makes it sound
Thank
really,
you.
really simple. It can take a little bit of time as we really want to understand exactly what your long-term and short-term goals are. Stephen, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it quite well, Ann.
Great. We're happy to help. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being our partner.
Well, and I'll thank everybody again on the call for joining us today. And if there's, no other questions, we really appreciate your attendance and hope you learned something new today. So stay on the lookout for an email from me, and I'll wish you a great rest of your afternoon.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.